welcome to AV Plus, the podcast from Commercial Integrator. I'm Adam Forziati, Senior Web Editor here at CI. Before System-on-a-Chip technology, digital signage was limited to screens, computers, and software all being separate entities on a project. If you think about it, digital signage technology hasn't really changed much in the last 20 years. Moving to something like 4K doesn't even tend to offer anything groundbreaking if it's being viewed from a distance. But with System-on-a-Chip, integrators have a way to offer their clients a solution which doesn't require a PC with expensive overhead and tons of memory. On this episode of AV Plus, I'm speaking with Chris Feldman, a signage product manager at NEC. We'll dig into the specific benefits of System-on-a-Chip and why now is the best time to offer it as a solution to your signage clients. But first, let's take a quick check-in on this week's AV News to Know. The Audio Engineering Society invites students and educators to attend the AES Show Student Week from October 19th through 23rd as part of its Audio Engineering Month events. The show will once again prioritize the education of tomorrow's audio professionals, offering activities designed to connect audio students and educators. Zoom announced several new Zoom Rooms features during its 4th annual Zoomtopia. In addition to virtual events, apps, and other tools for developers, Zoom announced several features that integrators and others in the AV community will want to pay attention to as customers begin returning to the office. These include the Zoom Rooms kiosk mode that will allow office visitors to engage a receptionist virtually, a scheduling display that can tell if people in the room is at capacity, enhanced voice commands, integrations with Alexa for Business, the ability to control Zoom Rooms from a mobile device or a laptop, and enhanced dashboard reporting and new controllers. So for more information on that and a full list of the latest AV products and projects, visit our website, commercialintegrator.com. Okay, let's get back to the show. So where do you think digital signage was before technologies like System-on-a-Chip?
Yeah, so, historically, when you think digital signage, whether it's for education or just in general, the immediate thought process is you have a display, you have a full PC, whether it's Windows or Linux-based or, what have you, like a Mac Mini, that type of thing. You have software involved with it, and then you deliver that to the customer. And the reality is that a lot of signage software itself has not changed much over the years. As an example, I like to take menu boards or FIDs as an example. The requirements for that to be put onto a display haven't changed much, right? You have, certain text information you need to have up there. You may want to make it a little more interesting with either some graphics or a background image, or even, a section that has a video embedded into it. And that's really about it. And for the most part, you're dealing with very large text. So even, moving to something like a 4K display isn't necessarily taking advantage of the additional resolution, because you're dealing with a monitor that's being, it's held, 8 feet above someone and, 7 to 10 feet away. And so at that distance, you don't necessarily take advantage of that 4K resolution. So what you're looking at is you have very minimal requirements for digital signage that you can deliver to the customer with a PC that doesn't necessarily need to have a lot of memory and a lot of overhead. Like you don't need, like a Core i7 to deliver digital signage. You can do that with something like a System-on-a-Chip, especially with the move to HTML5. Using HTML5 as a way to render content onto a display is, has it really changed the way digital signage works. Before there was, a lot of video codecs that were utilized and other types of ways to render content. Utilizing something like HTML5, in a very basic sense, it turns it into a web page, right? And so essentially the screen is acting just as an endpoint. So when you combine all that together, you have an overhead that doesn't necessarily require a lot of computations, and then you have a way to get to the screen in a very efficient manner. And so that you can move from your standard PC model to something like a System-on-a-Chip.
And so speaking, in that realm, I know network devices and the conversation surrounding them has been a big deal in the signage area. So where does System-on-a-Chip fit within the ability to actually network those devices?
So that's one of the great things about a system on a chip, because it's literally a computer that's small enough to fit onto a chip, right? It is what its name is, right? It allows the user to have essentially full PC type experiences without necessarily the expense and cost of implementing a full PC. So you can take a device, install it onto your network. You'll be able to see that device on your network with the right software installed on it. You can actually access that device remotely over the network. You'd have the ability to control it. And you're dealing with a device that is also fully solid state. So, that device is going to be something that's going to last a very long time for you. It's going to be something that's going to be is going to provide a high level of reliability. So if you have a screen that's hung, off of a ceiling or in some place that's not very easily accessible, running off something like an SoC, where you don't have to worry about, a fan on a small computer that you need to, clean out and, make sure that airflow is moving through it. You don't have, spinning hard disk drives that you need to worry about damaging themselves and then having to access that remote location. So all that kind of comes together and really kind of helps the customer when you put a signage application into those spaces. It just makes it easier for everyone.
Well, so speaking of the customer, I know that the signage world is really incredibly broad and maybe a little bit intimidating to some clients of AV integrators. So how can installers using SoC be that extra thing that helps clients who are intimidated by signage swallow the message, as it were? Like, how can they be sort of dissuaded from their intimidation with this technology?
Yeah, so the SoCs that are in displays are really great because they're really purpose-built machines, right? They're not designed to do all things. They're really built with the intention that someone's going to be using it to render content in a signage type setting or a menu board type setting, informational type setting. The great thing about it is obviously it's internal, right? So it's built into the monitor. So it's going to give you a lot of flexibility. Right now there's been a big push for mobile signs, right? So, the idea is if you have a public space and you need to, put reminders out there for people to wear masks, or if you have, traffic flow changes within the building saying, okay, I need everyone walking through this way, or even if you want to implement some sort of, messaging system in case there's an emergency, all that is kind of tied together. That makes it very easy to bring these devices into that space. You don't have to worry about procuring a PC and making sure that PC is compatible with the screen, and where you're going to hang that PC or mount that PC. Even a small mobile type PC like a Mac Mini or a NUC type device, you still have to attach it in some way to that screen. And when you're dealing with something that's mobile, that becomes more complicated. It's one thing when it's on the wall. It's another thing when you all of a sudden you have to move it. Plus, with ADA compliance requires that the front of the display be within 4 inches from the wall. So mounts are getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and so even with some of the mobile type PC platforms, they're very tiny compared to what they were 8-9 years ago. But the gap with screens as they're getting smaller just isn't there. There isn't really a lot of space to put these types of devices, even though they're getting tinier still. So by having an SoC, that's going to be something that you don't have to worry about. And again, a lot of them actually have pre-installed software designed to help you run signage on that device, whether it's a media player, whether it's a signage platform, or anything along those lines. Again, these are purpose-built devices that are really kind of constructed in a way that's trying to make life easy for those that want to have signage in a space.
Finally, once you nail down a project, what can this technology do to save money and time on the job itself? I mean, we're talking a lot about benefits to the client and the client's proposed solution, but what can system-on-a-chip technology do to save money and time on the job?
So with a system-on-a-chip, a lot of times that cost is built into the monitor, or it's a minimal cost that is tacked onto the top of the monitor. What we're looking at with this is, external PC platforms could often be, anywhere between half to the full cost of the monitor itself. So you can actually double the price per location for a digital sign. So when you're dealing with an SoC, you're looking at just the cost of the screen plus a small delta. And then when you multiply that, by a factor of, whatever that you have for your space, so like a menu board application in a cafeteria or canteen, right? Say you have, two different stations. Each station has 3 menu boards plus possibly a promo board, to let you know what the deals are for the day. So that's 4 screens times 2, that's 8. And now you've taken, what could cost, say if the screen was $1,000 a piece, you're adding, $500 to $1,000 a screen for a standard player. With SoC, you're looking at the cost of the monitor. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they're very, very reliable because they have all built-in solid-state components. Those components go a long way toward reliability. So they're something that doesn't need to be serviced a lot. And serviceability is one of those back-end costs that a lot of people don't necessarily take into account. You bring a project like this to a customer, they look at the price, they say, okay, great, it'll cost me X amount of dollars to bring this or put this into my facility. And then you don't realize, later on, every 6 months, you need to have a technician come out to deal with a PC that needs to be reset. And then you have the truck roll cost for that. Or if you have an area that it's in a maintenance area and it's very dusty and you have failures of computers and that type of thing. So all of those factors kind of come into play where it saves you money both in the beginning of the project where you're going to have a lower cost of entry to have that Signage project implemented in your facility. But then also later on with the reliability aspect of it, you're going to have much lower maintenance costs that you're looking at where you're probably just going to deal with, having to refresh the screen later as opposed to any kind of, related PC costs or issues you would have.
So, Chris, I appreciate your time today. Where can anyone in our audience who's interested in learning more go to find out about, System on a Chip or NEC in general?
So you can go to necdisplay.com/solutions.